The lawyer called. I'd inherited a house from someone I'd never met. When the real heir showed up, we discovered an impossible connection that changed both our lives forever. Before we dive into this incredible story, I'd love to know, where are you watching from today? Drop your city in the comments below. And be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Now let's head back to that life-changing phone call. At 32, I was living proof that sometimes hard work isn't enough. I'm a carpenter by trade, but not by choice, at least not originally. I had started college with dreams of becoming an engineer, but when my father died suddenly during my sophomore year, I had to drop out to help support my mother and younger sister. Dad had been a construction foreman, and he taught me to work with my hands from the time I could hold a hammer. After his funeral, those skills became our lifeline. I took whatever construction jobs I could find, sending most of my paycheck home to help Mom keep the house and put my sister through school. By the time my sister graduated and Mom was stable, I was 25 and had been out of college for so long that going back felt impossible. I had developed a reputation as a skilled carpenter, and the work was steady enough to pay the bills, but steady enough in a small Oregon town like Millfield meant living paycheck to paycheck, especially when the economy took a downturn. I'd been struggling for the past 2 years. The housing market had slowed, new construction had dried up, and I was competing with larger contractors for the few renovation jobs available. I was 3 months behind on rent for my studio apartment above Murphy's hardware store, living on ramen noodles and whatever odd jobs I could find. My landlord, Mrs. Murphy, was patient but firm. "Lucas, I know you're good for it," she'd said last week, "but I've got bills too. I need something by the end of the month or I'll have to start eviction proceedings." That's why when my phone rang on a Tuesday morning with a call from Henderson and Associates, attorneys at law, my first thought was that I was being sued for something. Maybe a client wasn't happy with my work, or perhaps I'd missed some tax payment I couldn't afford anyway. "Mr. Martinez?" The voice on the other end was professional but warm. "This is Patricia Henderson. I'm calling regarding the estate of William Thompson. You've been named as a beneficiary in his will." I sat down heavily on my couch, which doubled as my bed in the tiny studio. "I'm sorry. I think there's been a mistake. I don't know anyone named William Thompson." "Are you sure?" Miss Henderson asked. "He was an elderly gentleman, owned several rental properties around town. You may have done some work for him over the years." I thought for a moment. Over the past few years, I'd worked for dozens of properties, often for property management companies or landlords I never met face to face. Sometimes I'd get a call from a property manager saying, "Mr. So-and-so needs his kitchen faucet fixed," or "The porch railing is loose at the house on Oak Street." I rarely met the actual owners. "What kind of beneficiary?" I asked cautiously. "Mr. Martinez, William Thompson has left you his house, his primary residence on Maple Street, worth approximately $400,000. I nearly dropped the phone. $400,000. That was more money than I had ever imagined having, more than I could make in 10 years at my current rate. "There has to be a mistake," I said. "I don't understand why someone would leave me a house." "Mr. Thompson left a letter explaining his decision. Would you like to come to my office to discuss the details?"
2 hours later, I sat in Mrs. Henderson's office, still wearing my work clothes because they were the nicest clothes I owned, staring at a legal document that seemed too good to be true. The will was straightforward. William Thompson, age 78, had left his primary residence to Lucas Martinez, the carpenter who showed me kindness when I needed it most. Mrs. Henderson said, "He left this letter for you," handing me an envelope with my name written in shaky handwriting. I opened it with trembling hands and read, "Dear Lucas, if you're reading this, then I'm gone, and you're probably very confused. You may not remember me, but I remember you. Over the past few years, you've done work on several of my rental properties. You were always honest, always fair, and always kind to an old man who sometimes asked too many questions about your work. But more than that, you showed me a generosity of spirit that I hadn't seen in years. You never charged me for the little extras you did, never rushed me when I wanted to chat, never made me feel like a burden. When my tenant's kitchen faucet broke on the duplex on Pine Street, you came over on a Sunday to fix it because you knew she was a single mother with small children. When the porch railing was loose at the house on Oak Avenue, you reinforced the whole thing, even though I only asked you to tighten a few screws. I don't have any family left who cares about me, Lucas. My granddaughter and I had a falling out years ago, and she's made it clear she wants nothing to do with me. But you treated me like family, like I mattered. You gave an old man dignity and respect, and that's worth more than money. I'm leaving you my house because I believe good people should be rewarded for their goodness. Use it well, son. Be happy. William Thompson. As I read the letter, memories began to surface like pieces of a puzzle clicking into place. Mr. Thompson, yes, I did remember him now. An elderly man who owned several rental properties around town. He would always insist on meeting me at the job sites, would bring me coffee in a thermos, would ask about my family and my dreams. I remembered the Sunday he had called about the broken faucet. I had been planning to sleep in, maybe watch some football, but when he mentioned the single mother and her kids, I couldn't say no. The woman, Maria, had been so grateful. She had tried to pay me extra, but I'd refused. Just take care of those beautiful kids, I'd told her. I remembered the porch railing job, too. It was supposed to be a simple tightening of a few loose screws, but when I saw the condition of the whole railing, I knew it was a safety hazard. The tenant was an elderly man who used a walker. If that railing gave way, he could be seriously hurt. So I spent the whole afternoon reinforcing the entire structure, using materials from my own truck. You didn't charge me for all that extra work, Mr. Thompson had said when I handed him the bill for just the original repair. The railing needed to be safe, I replied. Mr. Henderson could get hurt. You're a good man, Lucas, he'd said, shaking my hand. Your parents raised you right. I remembered other jobs, too. The time I'd stayed late to finish a bathroom repair because the tenant was having her in-laws visit the next day. The time I'd fixed a broken window for free because the tenant was a college student who was obviously struggling financially. The time I'd spent an extra hour helping Mr. Thompson understand a contractor's estimate for roof work, explaining the technical terms so he wouldn't get taken advantage of.
But I had never been to his house. All the work I had done for him had been on his rental properties. I had no idea he lived in what sounded like a beautiful home on Maple Street. "Can I see the house?" I asked Miss Henderson. "Of course," she said. "I have the keys right here. But Mr. Martinez, I should mention, the will only covers his primary residence, and $20,000, he thought it was important for you to have some money to take care of the house. His rental properties and other assets were left to other beneficiaries." The drive to Maple Street felt surreal. I was about to see a house that apparently belonged to me, left to me by a man whose kindness I had barely noticed while I was struggling to make ends meet. The house was beautiful. A classic Victorian, painted in soft blue with white trim, surrounded by a well-maintained garden and a white picket fence that looked like something from a fairy tale. It was the kind of house I had always dreamed of owning, but never thought I could afford. As I walked through the rooms, I could see William's life laid out before me. The house was clean, but clearly belonged to someone who had lived alone for a long time. There were photographs on the mantelpiece. William as a young man, what looked like family photos from decades past, and several pictures of a young woman who bore a strong resemblance to him. In the kitchen, I found a calendar with my name written on several dates over the past 2 years, appointments for work I had done for his rental properties. He had kept track of every time I had helped him, every small job I had completed. The living room had a comfortable reading chair positioned by the window, with a small table beside it, covered in books and what looked like financial documents. On the coffee table was a photo album, and when I opened it, I found pictures of his rental properties, before and after shots of work that had been done. Many of the after photos showed repairs I had made. In his bedroom, I found a small notebook on the nightstand. Curious, I opened it and found what appeared to be a journal. The entries were brief, but several mentioned me. Lucas came by to fix the leaky pipe at the duplex today. Stayed an extra hour to make sure everything was working properly, didn't charge for the extra time. Good man. Called Lucas about the broken step at the Oak Street house. He said he'd be right over, even though it was his day off. These young people today, most of them don't care about anything but money. But Lucas is different. Lucas finished the bathroom repair at the Pine Street property. The tenant, Mrs. Garcia, called to thank me. She said Lucas was so polite and respectful, and he cleaned up everything perfectly. She said her grandson could learn a thing or two from him. I spent an hour walking through the house, trying to process the magnitude of what had happened. This wasn't just a house. It was a home, filled with memories and possessions of a man who had lived a full life. And now it was mine. But as I stood in William's kitchen, looking at the calendar with my name on it, I felt something I hadn't expected: guilt. This man had been lonely. He had reached out to me in the only way he knew how, through work, through conversation, through small acts of connection. And I had been so focused on my own struggles that I had barely noticed. I remembered now how he would linger after I finished a job, clearly wanting to talk. I had always been polite, but I was usually thinking about the next job, the next bill, the next crisis. I had treated him kindly, yes, but I hadn't really seen him. I hadn't understood that those conversations, those moments of human connection, might have been the highlight of his day.
3 weeks later, I had moved my few belongings into the house and was beginning to settle into my new life. I had paid off my debts, including the back rent to Mrs. Murphy, who had cried when I told her about my inheritance. I was using the house as collateral to start my own contracting business, finally able to be selective about the jobs I took. For the first time in years, I felt hopeful about the future. I was planning to honor William's memory by continuing to do good work, by treating people with the same kindness he had valued in me. That's when she showed up. I was in the front yard, trimming the hedges that William had clearly loved, when a car pulled up to the curb. A woman got out, probably in her late 20s, with dark hair and the same intelligent eyes I had seen in the photographs inside the house. She walked up to the gate with the confident stride of someone who belonged there, and when she saw me, her expression shifted from expectation to confusion to fury. "Excuse me," she said, her voice sharp. "What are you doing in my grandfather's yard?" I straightened up, suddenly very aware that I was covered in dirt and hedge clippings. "I'm sorry, are you looking for William Thompson?" "I'm looking for answers," she said, pushing through the gate. "I'm Rachel Thompson, William's granddaughter, and I want to know why a complete stranger is living in my grandfather's house." My heart sunk. This was the granddaughter William had mentioned in his letter, the one he said he'd had a falling out with. She clearly had no idea that he had left the house to me. "Miss Thompson," I said carefully, "I think we need to talk. My name is Lucas Martinez, and your grandfather left me this house in his will." The color drained from her face. "That's impossible," she said. "I'm his only living relative. I'm his heir." "I have the legal documents," I said gently. "I'm as surprised as you are. Maybe we should sit down and figure this out together." Rachel stared at me for a long moment,
and I could see her mind racing. "You're telling me that my grandfather, who I've known my entire life, left his house to a complete stranger?" "I'm not exactly a stranger. I did work for him over the years. But I understand why you're upset. This must be a shock." "A shock?" Rachel's voice rose. "I grew up in this house. I spent every summer here until I was 18. This house should be mine." "Look, I don't want to fight with you about this. Why don't you come inside, and I'll show you the will and the letter your grandfather left. Maybe we can figure out what happened." Rachel hesitated, clearly torn between anger and curiosity. Finally, she nodded. "Fine, but I want to see everything." We sat at William's kitchen table, the same table where he had probably eaten thousands of meals, where he had planned the work he wanted me to do on his properties, where he had made the decision to leave me his house. I showed Rachel the will, the letter, and the legal documents Miss Henderson had given me. I watched her face as she read her grandfather's words, saw the pain and confusion in her eyes. "I don't understand," she said finally. "He writes about you like you were close friends, but I've never heard of you. And he says he doesn't have family who cares about him, but—" She trailed off, looking around the kitchen with tears in her eyes. "What happened between you two?" I asked gently.
Rachel was quiet for a long moment. "I wanted to be an architect," she said finally. "I got into a great program at Portland State, but Grandpa thought it was impractical. He wanted me to study business to help him manage his properties. We fought about it constantly my senior year of high school. And I chose architecture anyway. I got a scholarship, moved to Portland, and threw myself into my studies. Grandpa was disappointed. He said I was being selfish, that I was abandoning the family business. We barely spoke after that." "When was the last time you saw him?" 3 years ago, Rachel said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I came back for Christmas and we had another fight. He said I thought I was too good for this town, too good for him. I said some things I shouldn't have said, and I left. I kept meaning to call, to visit, but I was so angry, and then time just passed." I could see the guilt and regret written all over her face. She had lost her grandfather, and now she was discovering that in her absence, he had formed a relationship with someone else, someone he had valued enough to leave his most precious possession to. "Rachel, I want you to know that I never asked for this. I had no idea he was even considering leaving me anything. If I had known he had family, if I had known about you—" "But you didn't know about me," she said bitterly, "because I wasn't here. I was too busy building my career to spend time with a lonely old man." "He was proud of you. There are pictures of you all over this house, pictures of your childhood, your graduation, your work." Rachel looked up at me with surprise. "Really?" "Really. He loved you, Rachel. I think he was just hurt that you had grown apart." We spent the next hour talking, and slowly the pieces of the puzzle began to come together. William had been a proud man who had built a successful property management business from nothing. When Rachel chose architecture over business, he had seen it as a rejection of everything he had worked for. But he had also been proud of her success, even if he couldn't bring himself to tell her so. In his loneliness, he had found comfort in his interactions with me. I represented something he understood: honest work, practical skills, the kind of straightforward relationship he was comfortable with. When he decided to make his will, he had chosen to leave his house to someone who had shown him kindness without expecting anything in return. "I should have been here," Rachel said, her tears streaming down her face. "I should have swallowed my pride and come to see him. I should have been the one taking care of him." "You couldn't have known. and he wouldn't have wanted you to sacrifice your dreams for him. He was proud of what you accomplished, even if he didn't know how to say it. But now he's gone, and I can't tell him I'm sorry. I can't tell him that I love him and that I never meant to hurt him. The next day, Rachel returned with a lawyer, a sharp-dressed man named Bradley Morrison, who looked at me like I was a con artist who had somehow swindled a fortune from a vulnerable old man. "Mr. Martinez," he said, settling into William's living room as if he owned the place. "My client believes there may have been undue influence in the creation of this will. An elderly man, possibly suffering from dementia, leaving his entire estate to a handyman? It raises serious questions." "First of all," I said, trying to keep my voice calm, "I never influenced him to do anything. And second, he didn't leave me his entire estate, just this house and some money. According to the lawyer who handled the will, his rental properties and other assets went elsewhere." "Perhaps not consciously," Morrison continued, ignoring my correction, "but you were in a position of trust. You had access to his properties, his personal space. It would be easy to manipulate a lonely old man." "That's not what happened," I said firmly. "Then you won't mind if we contest the will," Morrison said. "We'll be filing papers tomorrow. I'm confident we can prove that Mr. Thompson was not of sound mind when he made this decision." After they left, I sat in William's kitchen feeling like the walls were closing in. I had gone from having nothing to having everything, and now I was about to lose it all in a legal battle I couldn't afford to fight. That evening, I was going through William's papers, looking for anything that might help my case, when I found something that changed everything. Hidden in his desk drawer was another will, dated 6 months earlier than the one that left me the house. In this earlier will, William had left everything to Rachel. I stared at the document, my hands shaking. This proved that William had been thinking clearly, that he had made a deliberate choice to change his will, but it also proved that Rachel had been his original heir, that she had a legitimate claim to everything. The next morning, I called Rachel and asked her to come over. When she arrived with her lawyer, I handed her the earlier will. "I found this in your grandfather's desk. It's dated 6 months before the will that names me." Morrison's eyes lit up as he read the document. "This proves our case. The old man was clearly confused, changing his will back and forth. No rational person would—" "No," Rachel said, slowly studying the dates. "Look at when this was written. This was right after our last fight. He left me everything because he thought I would come back, that we would reconcile." "And then?" I asked. "And then months passed, and I never called. Never visited, so he changed his will again." She looked up at me with tears in her eyes. "He gave up on me." "Rachel," Morrison said, "this doesn't matter." "No," Rachel said firmly. "Lucas is right. Grandpa made a choice. He waited for me to come back, and when I didn't, he found someone else to care about." "You're making a mistake," Morrison warned. "This house is worth $400,000. "Maybe, but it's my mistake to make." After Morrison left in a huff, muttering about stubborn clients, Rachel and I sat in the garden behind the house. The silence stretched between us, heavy with everything that had been said and everything that remained unspoken. I keep thinking about all the Sundays I could have visited, all the phone calls I could have made. He was probably sitting in this house waiting for me to care enough to reach out. He understood why you stayed away. He was proud of what you accomplished. But he was also hurt and lonely, and you were the one who was kind to him when his own granddaughter couldn't be bothered.
Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Rachel started coming by the house regularly. At first, she said it was to go through William's belongings, to take the things that had sentimental value.
But gradually, I realized she was also coming to understand the man her grandfather had become in her absence. We would sit in his kitchen, drinking coffee from his favorite mugs, and she would tell me stories about growing up in the house. I would share memories of the work I had done for him, the conversations we had shared, the quiet kindness he had shown me. He used to make pancakes every day in the morning, Rachel said one afternoon as we sorted through his books. He would cut them into shapes, stars, hearts, animals. I thought it was silly when I was a teenager. He talked about you all the time, I said. When I was working on the duplex on Pine Street, he spent an hour telling me about a building you had designed in Portland. He had the newspaper article in his wallet. Rachel smiled through her tears. I won an award for that project. I kept hoping he would call to congratulate me, but he never did. He was probably hoping you would call to tell him about it. As we worked together, I began to see the woman William had been so proud of. Rachel was brilliant, passionate about her work, and despite her guilt about the past, she had a warmth and humor that reminded me of her grandfather. One evening, as we were going through a box of his old photographs, Rachel found something that made her gasp. It was a folder labeled Rachel's Projects, filled with newspaper clippings, magazine articles, and printed web pages about her architectural work. He kept everything, she whispered. Every article, every mention of my name. He was following my career the whole time. At the bottom of the folder was a letter, addressed to Rachel, but never sent. With trembling hands, she opened it and read, My dearest Rachel, I saw the article about your latest project in the Portland Tribune. The community center you designed is beautiful, and I'm so proud of the woman you've become. I know we parted on bad terms, and I know I was stubborn about your career choice, but seeing what you've accomplished, I realize I was wrong. You were right to follow your dreams, even if it meant leaving the family business behind. You're making the world more beautiful one building at a time, and that's worth more than any rental property I could have left you. I miss you, sweetheart. I miss our talks, our arguments, even our fights about your future. I hope someday you'll forgive a foolish old man for not understanding that love sometimes means letting go. All my love, Grandpa. Rachel was sobbing now, clutching the letter to her chest. Without thinking, I put my arms around her, and she leaned into me, letting out years of grief and regret. He forgave me, she whispered. Even after everything, he forgave me. He never stopped loving you, I said, holding her as she cried. It was in that moment, with Rachel in my arms and William's love surrounding us both, that I realized something had changed between us. What had started as a conflict over an inheritance had become something deeper, a shared understanding, a connection that went beyond legal documents or family obligations. When Rachel finally pulled away, she looked at me with eyes that were red from crying but also bright with something new. Lucas, she said, I've been thinking. Grandpa's rental business needs someone to take care of his tenants, make sure the properties are maintained properly. I've been wondering about that. The lawyer mentioned that his other assets went to different beneficiaries, but she didn't say who.
Rachel looked down at her hands. They went to me. The rental properties, his business accounts, everything except this house. Morrison found out when he was preparing the contest. So you did inherit something. I inherited his business, Rachel said. But I don't know the first thing about managing rental properties. I'm an architect, not a landlord. I could see where this was going, and my heart started beating faster. What are you thinking? I'm thinking, Rachel said carefully, that maybe Grandpa knew what he was doing. Maybe he left you the house and me the business because he wanted us to work together. You want to be partners? I want to honor his memory, she said, and I think the best way to do that is to take care of the things he cared about, his tenants, his properties. What are you proposing? Rachel took a deep breath. I'm proposing that we run the business together. You handle the maintenance and renovations. You already know the properties. You know what needs to be done. I'll handle the business side, the tenant relations, the design work when properties need updating. You will need to move back here for that. Yes, she said simply. Grandpa also left me an empty apartment downtown. I've been thinking of moving there. I stared at her, hardly daring to believe what I was hearing. You are really willing to move back to the town? I've been living in a tiny apartment in Portland, working 60-hour weeks, and for what? I've been so focused on proving that I could make it on my own that I forgot what I was trying to prove it for, she confessed. Rachel, this house is too big for one person. I've been feeling like a marble in a shoebox here. Why don't you move back into your grandfather's house? Grandpa left you the house, she said firmly. I couldn't take it from you, but maybe I could help you take care of it. Maybe we could both live here, at least until we figure out what we're doing. And you think we could make this work? As business partners? I think, Rachel said carefully, that we've already been making it work. These past few weeks, going through Grandpa's things, learning about his life, it's been the most meaningful work I've done in years. Over the next few months, Rachel and I worked out an arrangement that felt right to both of us. She moved back into her childhood bedroom, and we began the process of jointly managing William's rental properties. It was challenging work. Some of the properties needed significant updates, and we had to learn to navigate the complex world of tenant relations and property management. But it was also rewarding in a way that neither of us had expected. We were continuing William's work, taking care of the people and places he had cared about, and we were doing it together, combining my practical skills with Rachel's design acumen and business acumen. As we worked side by side, our partnership deepened into friendship, and friendship gradually became something more. It wasn't a dramatic, instant attraction of a romance novel. It was something quieter, more real, a growing appreciation for each other's strengths, a shared sense of purpose, and the comfortable intimacy that comes from working toward a common goal. The moment I knew I was falling in love with Rachel came on a rainy Thursday evening, 6 months after we had first met. We were working late in William's study, planning renovations for one of his rental properties, when the power went out. "I'll find some candles," Rachel said. But as she stood up in the darkness, she knocked over a stack of books. "Careful," I said, reaching out to steady her. In the darkness, my hand found hers, and for a moment we stood there, connected by touch and the shared silence of the old house around us. "Lucas," she said softly, and I could hear something new in her voice. "Yeah?" "I'm glad Grandpa left you the house. I'm glad you're here." "Even though it meant you lost your inheritance?" "I didn't lose anything," she said. "I found something I didn't even know I was looking for." When I kissed her in the candlelit darkness of William's study, surrounded by his books and his memories, it felt like the most natural thing in the world. It felt like coming home. A year later, Rachel and I were married in the garden behind the house on Maple Street. It was a small ceremony. Just close friends, a few neighbors, and the pastor from the church where William had been a member for 40 years. As we exchanged vows under the oak tree that William had planted decades earlier, I thought about the chain of events that had brought us to this moment. A lonely old man's decision to reward kindness had created not just an inheritance, but a family. William's house had become our house, his business had become our business, and his granddaughter had become my wife. But more than that, his legacy of kindness and generosity had become the foundation of our life together. We still manage his rental properties, and we've expanded the business to include affordable housing for young families and seniors. We've renovated the carriage house behind the main house into a workshop where I teach carpentry skills to local teenagers, and Rachel offers design consultations to help people create beautiful spaces on a budget. Every morning, I wake up in the house that William left me, next to the woman he loved more than anything in the world. And every day, I try to live up to the example he set, to be kind, to be generous, and to remember that the most valuable things in life can't be measured in dollars and cents. William Thompson never got to see his granddaughter come home, but his love brought us together anyway. His final gift wasn't just a house or a business. It was the chance for two people who had lost their way to find each other, and in doing so, to find themselves. What an absolutely beautiful story about how love and kindness can create the most unexpected families. William's wisdom in bringing Lucas and Rachel together shows us that sometimes the greatest inheritances aren't material. They're the connections we make with others. What do you think about William's decision to split his inheritance between Lucas and Rachel? Have you ever discovered that someone's actions had a deeper purpose than you realized? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you were moved by this incredible story of inheritance, love, and second chances, please show your support by hitting that like button, and be sure to subscribe for more amazing stories every day. Don't forget to click the notification bell so you never miss an upload. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.